of YouTube Live. Now, if you have been watching what's been going on in the Middle East, you know that it's going to affect every single one of us. I was reading today kind of a capsulization or a summary of what has been happening over the last few days. Of course, if you have are aware and have been following the news, then you know that United States and Israel attacked Iran over the weekend. And they have continued their attacks now, of course, into this day and will continue to do so. In fact, the President of the United States made it very, very clear that they will continue bombing and using their military might against Iran. Now, of course, by Monday, retaliatory strikes had happened and launched from Iran that has basically shattered any sense of security in the Persian Gulf. Neighbors who have basically enjoyed, freedom and also no problems with Iran have recently, of course, been attacked. Now, in those retaliatory attacks, at least 20 people have lost their lives, including six U.S. servicemen across the region and also in Israel. And of course, Israel is also not just being attacked by Iran, but just recently, of course, Hezbollah has now entered the fray by sending rockets and drones into northern Israel. And so Israel is now not just dealing with, of course, attacks on one front, but they're dealing with attacks on two fronts. And so it has definitely escalated. And we know that, for example, 3 U.S. military aircraft actually crashed in Kuwait. That's right, on Monday, due to apparent what we would call friendly fire. So we do know that this thing is not going swimmingly as they would like to make it sound. And you and I are definitely being affected by this because the first thing that I noticed, of course, this day was when I was out going by my local gas station, the price of gas had already gone up some 13 cents a liter. Or if you look at it in Canadian dollars, we're talking approximately about 59 cents a gallon has gone up. And it's going to definitely continue going up because the simple fact is that the one of the major straits that are currently where 20% of the oil has gone, that is the Strait of Hormuz, and it has been effectively choked off because the Iranians have said no one is going to be able to go through those straits. So all of a sudden, we are going to see some incredible changes. One of the things that I did notice today was the fact that the price of oil was around $60 to $65. Right now, in certain markets, it's up to $82 a barrel. $82 a barrel. That means obviously over the next few days, we are going to see the price of everything increase because whenever there is volatility in, of course, the Middle East or any place where the oil market could be affected, the price of oil instantaneously goes up. And now they're even predicting it will find itself well over $100 as long as this particular campaign is going on. And of course, this morning, Donald Trump made it very clear. He says, we're hoping to have it done within about 4 or 5 weeks. But he says it could go on longer. And he also said that because of the retaliatory strikes, he has planned to send the biggest wave of attacks that the United States has ever done, along with Israel. So this thing is just escalating. It's just getting worse and worse. And it's going to affect every single one of us because when the price of oil goes up, everything goes up. Because the simple fact is, oil is, of course, the most volatile, but also as well the most essential particular commodity in the world today. And even though United States is self-sufficient and self-reliant when it comes to oil and gas, many countries in the West are not. And so they are going to definitely be affected by what is going on in the Middle East. Also, as well, the conflict has seemed to, of course, gone even bigger because Israel now, because of what Hezbollah was doing, they've launched attacks against Lebanon in response to the provocation from Hezbollah, and the strikes have killed at least 50 people in Lebanon, according to authorities there. In Iran, the joint Israel United States strikes began, which of course on Saturday morning, have killed at least 555 people, according to the Iranian Red Crescent, including at least 168 people in the girls' elementary school that was hit, of course, in another part of Iran. Some say it was an accident. Some say it was, deliberate. We do not know. But the simple fact is, it has definitely escalated and is going to continue to escalate. And so we need to be aware of that. If you've been following this, and I have been following it fairly closely now, and been watching social media and also watching different news outlets talking about the whole crisis in Iran and also the attack from Israel and United States. It has become literally a regional war. And both Benjamin Netanyahu and President Trump basically said their objectives were to defend their respective countries from imminent threats posed by Iran. Most notably, they said, of course, to prevent the Islamic regime from getting nuclear weapons without providing evidence that that was actually happening. What was very interesting, according to, of course, Iranian sources, is that they had met with a couple of representatives, including Donald Trump's own son-in-law, and basically they said um, the talks were going very well. That's what they were saying. Unfortunately, as we have learned in the past, you can't exactly these days trust the Americans. And one of the things that was very interesting today when it came to, of course, the defense, I should say the Secretary of War, he used to be known as the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth. You know what he said? He said all rules of engagement that we would normally abide by, they're gone. We're going to do what we have to do to basically get our objective. So basically what the United States is saying these days, and we all know that the United States, which up to a year ago adhered to the rule of law, they kept to international rules of engagement when it came to war. He basically said today, all those rules are off. We're going to do what we have to do to basically get our objective. So he is not, and both Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth are not worried about what other international leaders say. They don't care about what the United Nations say. They don't care about what other nations say. They said, we are going to do what we want to do. And there's really nobody who can stop us. That is basically what they're saying, which of course is very, very frightening because as we've often said, if they do it to Iran, who's going to be next? They've done it already to Mexico, or I should say to Venezuela. And now, of course, they are crippling the economy of Cuba. The next question is Cuba the next regime that they're going to attack after they finish with Iran? It's a little scary these days because you have a country that had been for decades, literally, abiding by international rules and have basically said, we're throwing the rules out. That's what basically the Secretary of War said today. He says, we don't care about what international people say. We are going to do what we need to do to protect our country. That's what they've said. And if it means that we attack somebody, if it means that we bomb them into the Stone Age, it's okay. We're going to do that. And, that is what came out today. And that is definitely scary situation. Also, as well, I was reading today that, of course, the embassy in Saudi Arabia was also attacked. And also, as well, this is interesting, a major refinery in Saudi Arabia was temporarily closed. This particular facility is one of the largest in the world. It produces 550,000 barrels of oil every single day. And of course, we know that right now the Strait of Hormuz has been, of course, closed. And this is also very interesting. The American embassies, the government has said, we want all the American personnel and people out of the Middle East. There's only one problem. Most of the airports are closed. So how are these people going to get out? That is a major problem. You see, when you decide to, create a problem like going to war, there are many outlying and many different scenarios that begin to go out of control, which is a real problem with what is going on right now in the Middle East. Because you have Israel and you have United States, and they are, bombing, of course, Iran, and Iran is, of course, retaliating. But the difference is this. Iran is not just attacking Israel or, United States bases. They are also as well attacking hotels. They are attacking, factories. They are attacking, oil refineries. Why are they doing that? Because they are trying to get the allies of the United States to basically say, please stop the bombing. At least that's how many experts are saying. If they bomb enough of the countries around them, then these countries that have been friendly to the United States and have allowed the United States to put bases and also bases of operation, if they make enough damage, maybe these particular countries will say, you know what, you need to stop the bombing. But it's interesting that most of these particular countries have said, you know what, we're going to reserve the right to retaliate ourselves. Saudi Arabia has already said that. They've said we've authorized the fact that we will engage the Iranians in defense, but you never know. They might get involved in the war as well. So it's a very unstable situation right now. And really the problem is nobody really knows what's going on or how to get out of this. You see, I've heard many commentators say, listen, and of course, President Trump and Pete Hegseth said today, we might have to send troops into Iran. Can you imagine what that would mean? It's not, Iraq. Iraq had about 25 million people, okay? Iran isn't that way. They've got 93 million people, okay? It's a huge country. It is a logistical nightmare. It really, really is. And you won't be able to take down the Iranian regime just by air power. It means that if you're going to do the job, you're going to have to send boots on the ground. And that's literally meaning that it's going to be an extended conflict. He's hoping, that's Trump saying, well, it'll be 4 or 5 weeks. It's never that way. And, a perfect example of was United States got involved in Vietnam. And they were in Vietnam for a solid decade. And then in 1975, they were run out of Iran. A more recent situation is Afghanistan. After being in Afghanistan for almost 2 decades, you had the United States, and it was President Biden that closed down that war. But basically, you had United States and all of their personnel coming out of Afghanistan, and literally they had all kinds of armament left in Afghanistan, and the Taliban grabbed a hold of all that modern technology and have been using it against their own people. So we know what United States has done in the past. The question is, are they going to continue doing that in Iran? It is going to be a quagmire if they decide to, of course, invade, and they'll have to do that to change the regime. You see, the Secretary of War said that they're not going to worry about regular engagements. They will do what they want to work, and they're not going to worry about what the world has to say. So this is kind of where we are right now. And it's a very volatile and very also as well, unusual, chaotic situation. What you have right now is you have major world powers shooting war armament at each other, shooting drones at each other, shooting missiles at each other, blowing each other up, and of course it affects the entire world because, as we talked about before, 20% of the oil that flows in the world comes from that area. And so it's very volatile and it's going to affect every single one of us. And right now, nobody seems to know what they're talking about. You have one side saying, this is the reason why we did it. And it seems that day by day, when you listen to the president, when you listen to the administration that he leads, it seems that the narrative changes. It seems that what they say is not exactly true. And it's changing day by day. Now, one of the things that is happening and will be happening in the next couple of days in the United States is Congress is going to be passing a resolution, or maybe I should say, attempting to pass a resolution to basically, curtail Mr. Trump's war aspirations. Now, whether or not that is going to happen, I guess we're going to have to wait and see. The Democrats have said we're going to push for it. And there are some Republicans who may vote on that side as well. But if they don't get the majority that they need, when it comes across the desk of the president, he'll simply veto it and continue doing what he is doing. And we have seen that basically when it comes to this particular leader, he's going to do what he wants to do, and he's not going to worry about Congress, and he's not going to worry about the judicial system. He is going to, I mean, let's face it, he plunged United States into a war that, you know, and it was interesting. CNN did a poll today, and they said that 60% of Americans oppose the war, and only 40%, of course, approve of the war because they're concerned about, uh, future attacks. The only problem is that uh, you can't protect yourself entirely against an attack, especially when you have an enemy who is fighting for their survival. And they will do everything in their power, and they will use all the proxies and all the ways that they can to basically attack their enemy. So this thing is not over by any stretch of the imagination. What I'm saying today is United States and Israel should not underestimate Iran. And also as well, Iran better not underestimate United States and Israel. Okay? Because you have two combatants who are not going to back down. Who's going to blink first? Is it going to be the United States? Maybe. Is it going to be Israel? Most likely not. And of course, Iran isn't going to back down because the simple fact is they're fighting for their survival. And what would you do if someone was bombing the daylights out of you? Wouldn't you react? Wouldn't you also fight back? Of course you would, especially when the majority of your major leadership is gone. And the one thing that the United States is hoping that they said, we want you to, they want the Iranian people to rise up. But they have to realize Iran, just like most countries, is divided. And it's divided literally down the middle. You saw, for example, hundreds of thousands of people, dancing in the street. The following day, there were literally hundreds of thousands of people mourning the death of course, the supreme leader. So it's a deeply divided country. But what's even more divided is the fact that the Iran Revolutionary Guard is still the military power, and they are still under the leadership of the clerics of that particular country. And most of those clerics are not, of course, moderates. They're hardliners. And they look at this as the great Satan coming to attack Iran. And because America and Israel are known as the great Satan, they are going to they look at it as both a spiritual conflict and also a natural conflict. And because of that, there is going to be a strong religious component. And the problem is, and this is a real problem with religion, and I happen to be a Christian, okay? But the simple fact is, when you put religion and use it as a foundation for, you know, attacking others and using it as a foundation to basically promote evil. And that's what happens when you kill people, when you use it as a crutch, as a hammer. I mean, one of the things that happened in the 14th century and 15th century in Europe was there was a thing called the 30-Year War. You had the Protestants fighting against the Catholics and in Europe. And this went on for 30 years. And literally hundreds of thousands of people were killed. Catholics and Protestants were killed. That is a very bad mark on the history. And what happens today is you have Muslims killing Muslims, and that happens as well. And so religion can become a real problem. It can become a foundation for evil and also as well for saying, you know what, I can kill you because you're an enemy of mine and an enemy of my God. And that's a real problem. And historically, we have seen it over and over and over again. The Crusades were a perfect example of that. And so were, wars in history when it came to, of course, Muslims and Christians and Jews and all of those things that are going on. I mean, the Middle East War and what happened with the birth of Israel, of course, is a perfect example of that. And Israel has made a mandate, and that mandate is we are never going to go back and have another Holocaust. They've said that, and they will do everything in their power to make sure that that never happens again. And that's what October 7th was all about. They had 1,400 people that were killed by Hamas. And then, of course, they found themselves fighting a war in Gaza for a long, protracted time. And Hamas underestimated Israel, of course, when it came to their resolve to deal with and never let that happen again. And Israel is, of course, looking at Iran the same way. And Iran is looking at Israel the same way. And guess what? When you have two religions fighting against each other, there are no winners. And both will justify what they're doing by saying, God is with us. So that can become a real problem. And that's part of the interesting dynamic that we're dealing with in the Middle East. And of course, Israel, its biggest backer is the United States. And Mr. Trump, of course, is a strong backer of United States. And he has literally joined himself together with Israel. And the object of their attack right now is Iran. And and Mr. Trump has said it. He said, "I have done something that no other president since 1980 or 1979 has done. I decided to do something about Iran." Okay, so there we are. We're in the middle of this conflict, and every one of us will be involved in some way. We're all going to be affected by it. Most likely, us in the West, we're going to be affected economically. We're going to be watching the price of gas go up. We're going to see the price of, basic staples go up. Why? Because oil will spike and will go up. And for oil producers, it's a great boon. My province of Alberta, when the price of oil goes up, because we have the third largest reserves in all of the world, it is going to definitely help our particular situation. My government actually just tabled a budget that said we're going to run a deficit of about $9.7 billion in a province that sits on top of oil. As soon as the oil prices spike up, guess what? Our economy is going to go into overdrive because we need to have that oil revenue. And countries like, for example, England or Great Britain and Norway, they're going to have a great spike. And, as far as the oil producing countries are going, hey, this is great. We can make lots of money off of this thing. And yet the average consumer is going to be having some real fun with this. We're going to see the prices go up. How's it going to end? Only, only time will tell. Is it going to last a while? Well, according to Mr. Trump, it's going to be at least 4 or 5 weeks. That means that on both sides, there are going to be tremendous amounts of casualty. And the people that are really going to suffer it is those who aren't shooting the missiles or shooting the drones or flying the airplanes. It's the people who live in the cities of Iran and the people that live in the cities and in the countries of around the Gulf states and Israel. And also as well, what will happen is as more and more coffins come home to the United States for a war that doesn't really make much sense, it's going to be very interesting. So all I'm saying to you right now is simply this. Let's watch and let's pray and let's hope that diplomacy will finally kick in and the diplomats will be able to work out the details, because right now the diplomats have been put off to the side and the military people have basically, they're going to work. And when they go to work with modern warfare, it is devastating, absolutely devastating. And the innocent, and it's always the innocent that gets hurt the most. Did you know that, for example, in World War II, 30 million Russians lost their lives in World War II? And did you know that about 80% of the casualties that happened in World War II in Russia were civilians? When you look at what happened in Gaza, for example, you know that most of the people that lost their lives in Gaza were, of course, civilians. And the civilian population suffered in Lebanon. And the civilian population is going to suffer in all of these countries around the Middle East. The innocent always are the ones that suffer. And you have the leaders of these countries making all kinds of declarations. We're doing it for this reason. And it's really wonderful for Mr. Trump to be sitting in the Oval Office and directing his armed forces to attack. And yet he can sit there and justify in his mind what he's doing. But when it's the 18-year-old, the 19-year-old, the 20-year-old that is going to war, it is the civilian that is losing their lives. Let me just be very frank with you. War is not a good thing. There's an old song that goes like this. What are you good for? War? Absolutely nothing. And it's really true. And here we are in another war. And this one has global implications. These are my thoughts on this particular situation. And I didn't mean to spend, a couple of my YouTube live broadcasts on this particular situation, but I am concerned. I'm deeply concerned about what is going on. And for me as a Canadian, looking at what's going on right now in the United States, in my earlier broadcast today, I learned that Canada has actually made an appeal to the NATO alliance and said, if we happen to be attacked by the United States, we will expect you to come to our aid. If they are willing to do it to, of course, Iran, and if they're willing to do it to Venezuela, what makes you think that they wouldn't try and do it to somebody else? Personally, I think the next country that he will go after, that being President Trump, I think it will probably be Cuba. He's right now trying to economically destroy Cuba. But don't be surprised for a single moment that after he's finished with Iran, he'll go to Cuba and go after them as well. And part of my belief in that one is because of the fact that Mark Rubio, who is, of course, the Secretary of State, his family is from Cuba. And he would love to see Cuba again become a democracy. And it was his family that had to flee from Cuba because of Castro. So don't be surprised if that is the next country that United States goes after. Right now, though, they are in Iran, and they're going to be in Iran for a little while, and we're all going to be affected by this. So those are my thoughts tonight. I hope that I haven't rambled on, but I would like to take a moment. Father, I want to pray right now for what's going on in the Middle East. I know that there's a lot of folks out there that are talking about biblical prophecy concerning this matter. But right now, there are innocent people on all sides that are being affected by this. And also as well, economically, we're all going to be affected by this. Is this a good idea? In my opinion, no. Attacking somebody who had no real intention of attacking you. That was the justification that has been used by, of course, the administration in the United States. They were planning to attack us, so we attacked them first. That's not really good justification. And to also as well go into negotiations in good faith and then change the narrative by attacking the person that you are, of course, in negotiations with, that's not good either. But right now, we see a regime that's going in the United States that seems to not really care about rule of law or about international relationships. We can see that. So we do pray for cooler heads, and we pray that someone will be able to talk to the president and say, listen, this is not a good idea. Lord, it might be someone in the international community. It might be somebody in his base. And we also pray for the people of Iran, because there are a lot of innocent people who are being hurt by this. We know that the regime in Iran has been brutal, and it has been very dictatorial. And They've hurt their own people. We know that. So we're not praying for that regime per se. We're praying for the people of Iran. We're praying for the people who have, come to faith in recent days. And we're praying today that it will turn around. That's what we're praying for. We're also praying for the families of American servicemen who have lost their lives. They're asking the question, why are we doing this? And every time there's a war, there's always young people who come back, and they're not coming back in some sort of reunion. They're coming back in a coffin, and that often happens. I know that, for example, when Canada went to war in Afghanistan, because we answered the call of the United States, we had many of our service people coming back in coffins. And we also had literally hundreds of service people come back with different types of injuries and suffering from PTSD. I remember as a when I was talking to my military friends, my biker buddies, and many of them had served in Afghanistan and served in the Middle East and served in Bosnia, and they were still dealing with the memories of that. Lord, we know that, of course, war is not good. So we're praying that cooler heads will prevail. And we ask that, Lord, your hand would be upon this. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, again, we've given you some information about what's been going on. This is an ongoing fluid situation. Check out, of course, the regular different types of media. There's lots of information on the internet on what is happening in the war in Iran and what's going on concerning that. Do your due diligence and remember, we're all involved in this, whether we like it or not, because the simple fact is we're all consumers. And as consumers, whatever goes on in the Middle East affects us. Because remember, most of the oil that supplies Western democracies comes from the Middle East. My own country of Canada, even though we sit on some of the greatest reserves, we still get our oil in the eastern part of our country from the Middle East. So that's going to affect the people in the eastern part of our country. Canada is a huge country. Canada is the second largest country in the world. We have 6,000 miles across this country. It's absolutely huge. I've been from one end of this country to the other. It's absolutely huge. And so, you know, we are out here in the West, but out in the East, of course, most of our oil comes from the Middle East. So guess what? It's going to affect people in Eastern Canada. And it's going to affect us all because the simple fact is, as I said today, I drove down my local street and saw our gas station, and it was up 13 cents a liter in one day. 13 cents. Yesterday, it was this price. Today, it was that price. I expect that tomorrow morning when I drive by it again, the price will go up again. Why? Because we know that oil companies will do everything they can to gouge a dollar out of you. And that's unfortunate as well. So it's affecting us all. And you'll see it not only at the gas pump, you'll see it in the grocery store, you'll see it in so many different ways. It may take a while for us to get through all of this, and we'll see higher prices because of what's been going on in the Middle East. Anytime that there's volatility in the oil market, it affects not only the oil market, but it also affects, the Dow Jones, the NASDAQ, the Toronto, the different places around the world. It's affecting all of them. Instability is something that investors don't want to see. And this is very unstable times, chaotic times, confused times. So my simple suggestion is keep your head and keep aware of what's going on around today. My name is Robert Dean Steele. Thank you for spending time with me. Have yourself a good night. And who knows? Maybe I'll be talking about this tomorrow. Or maybe I'll go back to my regular subjects. Have yourself a great and godly night.